Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Keipert Labs. In today's video we're going to go through an overview of the nervous system. So we're going to remind ourselves of the different systems that our body has and how they need to connect together. We're then going to look at the processes involved in control and coordination. So how does our body make sure that everything works together effectively? And then you're looking at focusing on the nervous system as one aspect of how our body makes that control. So we're going to look at the different parts, so the neurons and nerves, the central nervous system, and the peripheral nervous system. So our body has a range of different systems that need to function together effectively to keep us alive. Okay, so from ones that you're more familiar with, like the cardiovascular or circulatory system, digestive system, skeletal system, to some other ones which you are less familiar with or that we're going to be learning about. The key thing is that they all work together to keep you healthy and safe and functioning well. And as part of that, your body needs a way to make sure they can all communicate effectively with each other, so that things can happen at the right time and if they need to happen in a particular sequence. And so we call this control and coordination. So how your body is able to actually direct traffic or to decide what happens and when, and making sure that it happens together. So thinking about the action of someone leaping on the here to actually catch a ball in midair. Okay, so you've got the eye perceiving the stimulus, so some piece of information about what is about to happen, sending a message to the brain, the part of the brain which then decides what to do, and making sure that then the muscles are able to do so, so sending the messages down to them in order to catch the ball. All of these things, it's a really complicated process, and it needs to happen really smoothly so that you could do something which is as simple as that as far as our everyday life. So it makes sure that our body systems function together. So this, in thinking about this, that we have the three processes of stimulus, so some information, the processing in the brain or in the spinal cord, and then the response that happens afterwards. So the process of coordination, this kind of looks a little bit detailed, but I'll just, it kind of relates back to what I just said. We've got stimulus, processing, and response. So how does our body take in information either about their environment around us or our internal environment? And then that information gets collected by receptors or sense organs like your eyes and ears, and other ones that you'd be less familiar with, like stretch receptors in your muscles and so on. That information is received by your sensory kind of organs and structures, and then turned into a message that gets transmitted to the central nervous system by neurons or nerve cells. The brain processes that information, decides on a response, and then sends that message out towards the effectors, which are the things that are doing the action. Okay, so we've got a signal that's being sent out here to the right place, and then we respond in the right way. And then your body gets some feedback about whether that has worked or not, and then processes again. Okay, so it's quite a, when we think about each of these bits, that there's quite a bit of messaging and processing that's going on. And this is kind of the essential sort of overview of how your body processes information. Okay, so even though it's a bit detailed, do try and take careful note of the details here. Okay, so the nervous system is one aspect of how your body processes this information. Okay, we're going to look at the endocrine system afterwards to look at slow control, but the nervous system is all about that fast control. It's got two main sections: the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord, and it's called CNS for short, or the peripheral nervous system, or PNS, which corresponds with all of the nerves that travel throughout your body that connect up to the central nervous system, and then they make their way out from your brain all the way down to the tip of your big toe, for example, and then lots of other shorter distances as well. Okay, so central because it's in the middle and it's the kind of key sort of function. Peripheral because it's around the outside or extends to the edges. That's kind of like the why we use those words. Okay, so the way that this all works is because of these specialized cells called neurons. Now, we're going to focus on these in another video, so I'm just going to give you a quick intro with this. But so this is a computer 3D model of a neuron, a nerve cell, okay, where you've got the body of the cell and then its kind of action point at the end here, and then this long kind of connection between them, how the message gets from point A to point B. Okay, so that they transmit these messages in the form of electrical signals, and they're chemical electrical signals in terms of stuff that happens inside the nerve cell itself to actually pass that signal along. So the nerve cells are called neurons. We bundle those neurons together to form nerves. So this shows you the nerves traveling down through your left arm, for example. Okay, and so with lots of different neurons that travel together and then split off into particular spots. So the central nervous system, as I mentioned before, or CNS, consists of the brain and the spinal cord working together. Okay, so this is your main sort of processing and decision-making area. So the brain is made up of multiple kind of sections. Here we've just labeled a few of them, but it functions as the control center. Okay, so it receives information from from your sense organs, it processes it, and then it acts on it. Okay, and then there's different sections within your brain that are responsible for acting on or involved in different processes. Okay, so you have your cerebellum, which is involved in walking and talking and muscle kind of control. Your brainstem, which is kind of your most basic body functions like breathing and heart rate. And the general idea is that we start with really simple, and then as we move right towards the front here, that's where you get to your really high order thinking. So your decision making, your judgment, your moral, sense of moral right and wrong, all kind of originates at the very front of your brain. And the idea is that your brain tends to develop from back all the way to front. And so then you've got some other different sections in here as well. So thalamus involving some, like body temperature functions and things, and pituitary gland, kind of which will be the master gland for your endocrine system that we'll look at. But the idea is that each part does a particular job or it relates to certain functions. And we know, we've mapped those out to some degree. There's some things that we still don't know or understand about how the brain is able to adapt. But this is part of how it functions. And the spinal cord is also kind of part of our central nervous system, connects up to the brainstem at the very kind of back of the brain, and then it travels down the inside of your vertebrae or your spinal column, and it connects between the brain and your peripheral nervous system. Okay, so the idea is that the neurons of the peripheral nervous system connect up at some point on the spinal cord, depending on exactly where they are in your body, that they might connect up lower down or right up the top. Okay, so we have this as a little bit of a cross-section. We'll go through a bit more in a second, but the idea is that then, this is actually kind of wrapped inside that protective bone casing. That's what gets damaged if someone's, if they break their back or break their neck, that then these nerve connections can be damaged or severed altogether. Okay, and so it's actually kind of, this is showing you how it's encased within the space around that bone. So the vertebra, the discs that's kind of sandwiched between them, and then the spinal cord protected in the middle. So this is kind of showing a bit more of a detailed cross-section. So you've got some different, nerve fibers from sensory nerves, entering into the spinal cord. You've got the grey matter, which is kind of the bit in the middle that does some processing and kind of directing traffic. You've got white matter where you've got some other nerve fibers that kind of run, and then you've got looking at motor and sensory nerves that kind of relate to your processing information and then your doing. Okay, so your peripheral nervous system, which connects up to that, contains what we call sensory and motor divisions. So sensory division, looking at your sensory receptors, they're carrying messages to the central nervous system for processing, so things like information from your eyes and ears and your taste buds and so on. That they all, they're sending messages towards the central nervous system. Okay, your motor division is carrying it away from the central nervous system to things that can cause an action, muscles and glands. Okay, so you've got somatic kind of nerves that carry things to voluntary control, things that you can choose as what happens, or autonomic nervous system relates to things that you have no conscious control over, like your heart rate and your pupil reflex, and sphincters inside your digestive system, for example. They're all controlled by your peripheral nerves. So peripheral nerves all enter or leave the central nervous system. They do one or the other, but they all make a connection at some point there. Okay, so we went through the different body systems. We talked about the need for and the processes involved in coordination and control. And we went through the different parts of the nervous system, so the nerves and neurons. We looked at the structure of the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system in its sensory and motor divisions. Thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.